Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report. I'm Amy Goodman. Brazil's presidential election is headed to a runoff. In the first round of voting Sunday, Brazil's former president, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, of the leftist Workers' Party, won 48% of the vote, beating Brazil's far-right president, Jair Bolsonaro, who received 43% of the vote. It was a closer result than many projected, and Bolsonaro-backed candidates also performed well in other races. Lula spoke to supporters Sunday night.
I've never won an election in the first round. I've won all of them in the second round. All of them. Here in the second round, what's important is the chance to think thoroughly on what you propose for society, to build a network of alliances and supporters before winning, for you to show to the people what will happen and who will win.
There is widespread fear in Brazil that Bolsonaro could attempt to stage a coup to stay in power. This has already been the most violent election campaign Brazil has seen in years. Bolsonaro spoke Sunday.
We are going to form good alliances for us to win the election. I can't talk of it at the moment.
We'll have more on Brazil after headlines. Ukraine has recaptured the city of Lyman, a key railway hub in eastern Ukraine. Russian troops withdrew from the city Saturday, one day after Russian President Vladimir Putin held a signing ceremony to mark the annexation of the area. According to press accounts, many residents there didn't even know Russia had annexed the area. At the United Nations, Russia vetoed a resolution condemning Moscow's annexation of 4 regions in Ukraine. 10 nations of the UN Security Council supported the resolution. 4 nations abstained: China, Gabon, India, and Brazil. Ukraine responded to the annexation by accelerating its bid to join NATO. This comes as President Biden signed a spending bill that includes $12 billion in new U.S. military aid for Ukraine, this on top of $54 billion already approved by Congress. In more news on the war, Ukrainian authorities say at least 25 civilians have died in a Russian missile strike on a civilian humanitarian convoy attempting to leave the city of Zaporizhia. 88 people were reportedly injured. On Friday, Russian President Vladimir Putin gave a major address where he painted the war in Ukraine as an existential conflict for Russia. He accused the United States and its allies of waging a hybrid war against Russia and of attacking the Nord Stream gas pipelines connecting Russia to Germany. The pipelines were ruptured last week in what's widely viewed as an act of sabotage.
Sanctions were not enough for the Anglo-Saxons. They moved into sabotage. It is hard to believe that it is a fact that they organized the blast on the Nord Stream international gas pipelines, which run along the bottom of the Baltic Sea. They began to destroy the pan-European energy infrastructure. It is clear to everyone who benefits from this. Of course, those who benefit did it.
The United States has denied any involvement in the pipeline attack, but on Friday, Secretary of State Tony Blinken acknowledged the development presents a, quote, tremendous opportunity for the United States.
And ultimately, this is also a tremendous opportunity. It's a tremendous opportunity to, once and for all, remove the dependence on Russian energy, and thus to take away from Vladimir Putin the weaponization of energy as a means of advancing his imperial designs.
The death toll from Hurricane Ian has reached 87 and is continuing to grow amidst a massive search and rescue effort in Florida. About half the deaths occurred in Lee County, which waited until a day before the storm to issue a mandatory evacuation order. President Biden's expected to visit Florida on Wednesday. Today, he'll be in Puerto Rico, where Hurricane Fiona killed 25 people and knocked out power to the entire island. About 14% of the island is still without power 2 weeks after that storm. Sunday marked the 16th day of consecutive protests in Iran following the death of Mahsa Amini, a 22-year-old Kurdish Iranian woman who died after she was detained by the so-called morality police for allegedly violating Iran's hijab law. According to the Norway-based group Iran Human Rights, 133 people have been killed since the protests began. On Sunday, police fired tear gas and paintballs at student protesters in Tehran. Meanwhile, the Committee to Protect Journalists reports at least 28 journalists and photographers have been arrested covering the protests. In news from the occupied West Bank, hundreds of mourners gathered Friday for the funeral of a 7-year-old Palestinian boy named Rian Suleiman, who suffered a heart attack after being chased by Israeli soldiers. His father, Yasser Suleiman, spoke Friday.
My son was walking back from school with other pupils. The soldiers were in the area, but there were no clashes. They were chasing students until they reached my home. When they reached my home, they wanted to detain Rian's brothers, my 2 older sons. When Rian heard about the detaining process, he went to another entrance for our home and was scared. Then I found him dead on the spot.
In Indonesia, at least 125 people, including 17 children, were trampled to death or suffocated Saturday at a soccer game in East Java after riot police fired tear gas to prevent fans from reaching the field. It was one of the deadliest incidents in the history of soccer. For the second time this year, a military coup has occurred in the African nation of Burkina Faso. A group of army officers led by Captain Ibrahim Traoré seized power Friday, ousting another military officer, Lieutenant Colonel Paul-Henri Damiba, who had led the country since a coup in January. On Saturday, protesters attacked the French embassy, where some had believed the ousted president was hiding. Some supporters of Friday's coup flew Russian flags in the streets while calling for Moscow to help Burkina Faso confront its security crisis. Venezuela has released 7 U.S. citizens, including 5 oil executives, as part of a prisoner swap that saw the United States release 2 relatives of Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro, who had been jailed on drug charges. It was the largest prisoner swap since Joe Biden took office. A pair of twin brothers in Texas have been charged with manslaughter for shooting at a group of migrants who'd stopped to get water near the U.S.-Mexico border. One of the migrants died, another was injured. One of the brothers, Michael Shepard, was the warden at a privately run immigration jail, the West Texas Detention Facility, which has been accused of abuse. He was fired after the attack. British Prime Minister Liz Truss has scrapped a plan to lower taxes for Britain's highest earners. The proposal, which was announced just 10 days ago, sparked protests and a warning from the International Monetary Fund. On Sunday, hundreds of thousands of people in Britain took to the streets in a protest organized by the Enough is Enough campaign.
A lot of workers and a lot of people that are working in this country have had enough. They've had enough of not working full time and not being able to pay their energy bills and not be able to put food on the table.
The U.S. Supreme Court begins its new term today with a historic first, as Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson will become the first black female justice to ever hear a Supreme Court case. Key issues before the court this term include affirmative action and voting rights. And Indigenous activist and actress Sasheen Little Feather has died at the age of 75. In 1973, she took the stage at the Oscars on behalf of Marlon Brando, who boycotted the ceremony to protest Hollywood's portrayal of Native Americans. Some members of the audience booed and mocked Little Feather as she addressed the awards ceremony wearing traditional Apache clothing.
He very regretfully cannot accept this very generous award. And the reasons for this being are the treatment of American Indians today by the film industry, and on television in movie reruns, and also with recent happenings at Wounded Knee.
The actor John Wayne reportedly attempted to remove Sasheen Little Feather from the stage, but was restrained by 6 security guards. Clint Eastwood mocked Little Feather later in the ceremony. She died on Sunday. In August, the Academy Museum of Motion Pictures finally issued an apology for her treatment nearly 50 years ago. And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, the War and Peace Report.